Any more questions? Shall we move to the next example? All right. So we'll talk something about XPath now. So let's say if I go to Gmail. So far we have seen when I need to type something, I just take an XPath like this and I say selenium.type, right? But if you take a look over here in Firepath, we have another option available over here. If I click on this and if I again take my mouse over here, I'll get the value like this. Now this value will also going to work like the same way that the previous value this was working. There is no difference in the execution of these two XPaths. This XPath, we call it as a relative XPath, and that one is called as an absolute XPath. Absolute XPath because it is actually showing the location of this element on the branch page. Now, what is the difference in a relative XPath or an absolute XPath? The first difference in these two XPaths is that, let's say this is the home page of this application. Let's say this is my application, and this is under a maintenance release. And there are some bug fixing going on this page. Now, by mistake, what one of the developer did, by mistake, he shifted the location of this username text box from this location to this location. Now, in this case, which XPath will gonna work and which XPath will gonna fail? Will this XPath gonna work, or will the other XPath gonna fail? Which will gonna work over here? So the other XPath we have seen is generated with the ID of this element, right? And this one is generated with the actual location of this element, right? So if there something happens on this page, if the location of this element changes from this location to this location, then the relative XPath will always gonna work and the absolute XPath will gonna fail. So this XPath will gonna fail if anything happens to the location of this element, because ID of this element will always gonna remain the same. No matter whatever location this element will gonna have, the ID will always gonna remain the same, right? This is one of the difference. But the second difference is that, let's say you can see some values over here. If I copy the XPath, if I paste it over here, and if I copy the second XPath of the second element, and I'll paste it over here, right? Now, in these two XPaths, you can see the only difference is the div index over here. Rest, all the XPath is constant. Only this index is changing, right? If I take the XPath as relative as well, for this element, the XPath is this. For the second element, the XPath is this, right? So these are the relative XPath. And these are the absolute XPath, right? Now let's say in a sequence, let's say I have one or two, and in the same sequence, I have 10 text boxes available over here, right? So this one is the first text box, this one is the second text box, and same in the sequence, I will have another 8 text boxes, other 8 text boxes, right? So as per my manual test case, the very first thing I will be doing is that I will be validating that all the text box exists on the page or not, right? So I'll be checking whether the username text box is there, password text box is there, and if there are other text boxes in a same sequence, all are present on a page or not, right? So in order to do that, what I'll do, let's say, if I go to Eclipse, I'll create a new class. I'll say test, and here copy this initial code again, and then go to gmail.com. Now, firstly, I want to validate that this particular element exists on the page or not. So what I'll do, I'll just take the XPath and I'll say Selenium dot. There is a method is element present, right? If you take a look at the return type of this method, then this is a Boolean method. A Boolean method always returns the value as true or false, right? So it accepts one argument, that is the locator, and I'll give this XPath inside the locator. Now this will gonna return me true if this element is present on the page, and if this element is not present on the page, then this will gonna return me false, right? So what if I now if I print it, if I say system.out.println, and if I run this, it will gonna give me the result in the form of true or false. If this element is present on the page, it will gonna return true, else it will gonna return me false. And if you take a look over here, in the console, you can see it has returned the value as true, right? So same thing I'm going to do with the next text box as well, right? So for the next text box, I will be taking the XPath of this text box again, and again I will be saying Selenium dot is element present, right? And I'll again be giving the XPath like this. So let's say after this text box, I have 8 more text boxes. So will I be writing Selenium dot is element present 8 more times? So every time I'll be taking XPath of an element, every time I'll be writing Selenium dot is element present. If I'm using this relative XPath, then I have to write the statement 10 times for each element, right? So with the help of absolute XPath, if you see this absolute XPath over here, just one second, I just disconnect. Guys, are you able to hear me properly? Like is the screen and everything appears fine? Okay, I got answer yes from Anand. Everyone able to hear me properly? Okay, yes, yes. Okay. All right. Okay, so with this absolute XPath, you can see that the first element index is 1, the second element index is 2, and if we have 10 more elements in the sequence, then the index of those elements will be 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. Right. This is in the case of absolute XPath. But in a case of relative XPath, it will be like this. So if I use this absolute XPath, what I can do, I can write a logic. I can just write for int I equal to I can see that the value of this is starting from 1. Let's say I need to run from 1 till 6. So I'll run my for loop from I equal to 1. I is less than equal to 6. I plus plus. And inside this, I'll say Selenium dot is element present. And I'll give this XPath. So XPath should be started from double backslash. And then instead of 1, I'll concatenate the value of I. Right. So what we are trying to do over here, it will start from 1. It will first check whether this element is present on the page or not. Then it will increment the value of 1. It will then check the second is present or not. Then the third, then fourth, and it will gonna run up till 6. Right. So if I just print this, now what it will going to print? I'll just save this and run this. So if the elements are present, it will gonna print true. Otherwise, it will gonna print false. And if we take a look at Eclipse, you can see for the first 2 times, it has printed true, and for next 1, 2, 3, 4 times, it has printed false. Right. So with just one simple logic, we have tried to handle 6 elements. All the 4 elements were not present over there, right? But with this absolute XPath, we can put some logic inside this XPath, which we cannot put inside the XPath that are related. Right. To make you more clear, I'm going to show you one more example using this. So what I'm going to do, I'll go to a website. So on this website, you can see there are 4 checkboxes, right? And over here as well we have, okay, let's talk about these checkboxes, right? Out of these, 2 checkboxes are checked and 2 checkboxes are not checked, right? So what we are going to do, we are trying to handle this checkbox element in this example, right? So I'll create a new class and say test checkboxes. I'll just copy this initial code, paste it here, and just change the website name, website URL. So the base URL will come in this argument, and the further URL will gonna come over here, right? Now, how to handle this checkbox element? Let's say this element, this checkbox is already checked on this page, right? So if I just inspect this element, I got an XPath like this, and in order to check this element, I can also say selenium.click. So what will happen? If I run this now, and if you take a look at that element, it has unchecked this element, right? Because we have used the method as selenium.click. So if the checkbox is by default checked, it will gonna click on it and will gonna make it unchecked. So in case of checkboxes, we should not use selenium.click, rather we should use selenium.check. So check will first gonna check whether that particular checkbox is checked or not. If it is checked, then it will keep it as checked. If it is not, then it will gonna check it, right? So what I'm going to do is when I run this checkbox is already checked, and we're gonna see whether it will gonna uncheck it or not this time. So if I run this, still loading. All right. So if we take a look over here, see this is still checked. It has not unchecked it. Right. Now what I want to do, I can see 4 checkboxes over here. Right. So let's say if I again go back to this profile. So if I want to check this, I have used this XPath and I have said selenium.check, right? So next time, if I want to check this, then I'll again use this and I'll again say selenium.check, right? And give the locator as like this. Now in the third case as well, I'll again take the XPath and I'll again say selenium.check. Right, selenium.check. And same in the case of the 4th checkbox as well. I'll again take the XPath and will say selenium.check. Right. And give the XPath like this. And when I run this, it will gonna check on all the 4 checkboxes, right? But right now there are only 4 checkboxes. So at times you might get an error like this. Selenium is already running on this code. This is because if you are starting your Selenium server from the code, then you need to stop it as well. You need to write server.stop. If you don't write it and if you run it for the next time, it will not gonna run. Now you can try it again and again, it will again gonna fail. So if I run this again I'm going to get the same error that failed to start the Selenium server. Right? It will not allow me to run it. So what I will do, the server is already started, I'll just comment this for the time being, server.start, because it is already started, so I don't want to start it again. So I'll just run this again, and now this will gonna work. Right. It will again go to this website. And if you take a look over here, it has checked all the 4 checkboxes. Right. But for checking these 4 checkboxes, I have taken the XPath of all these checkboxes individually. Right. Now let's say instead of these 4 checkboxes, I have 100 checkboxes in a sequence. Then will I be taking the XPath for all the checkboxes? No, I will not do that. In case of relative XPath, we might have to take the XPath of all the checkboxes. But with the help of absolute XPath, you can see over here, the only thing in these 4 checkboxes that are changing is that these index value, right? It is starting from 1 and it is going up till 4. So what I'll do, I'll just remove the rest 3 of them. I'll create a for loop and I'll start it from 1. Since the first value is 1, I'll say in I equal to 1, I is less than equal to, I need to run it up till 4 because there are 4 checkboxes, and then I'll say I plus plus. And then I'll put it over here. And instead of 1, I'll concatenate the value of I over here. I'll put this I over here. So what will happen? The very first time the value will be 1, it will gonna check this. The second time the value will be 2, it will gonna check the second element. Then it will increment and make the value to 3, then 4, and it will gonna check all the 4 elements. So in just one logic, if there are 100 checkboxes, then I'll give this value to I less than equal to 100. It will start from 1. And in just one logic, it will gonna check all the checkboxes. So now, if I run this again, it will again go to this website. And this time, again, it will gonna check all the checkboxes in just one simple logic, right? Now here, you know how many checkboxes are there, right? You know that there are 4 checkboxes, so we have used this for loop, right? Okay, someone has some questions. All right, please ask. Yes, Priyanka, you can ask your question. Yes, for IE, for Firefox, for Chrome, the XPath will gonna remain the same because the XPath is generated from the HTML property, and the HTML will gonna remain the same on all the browsers. Right? We're gonna deal with the browser compatibility testing as well, but we'll do it in WebDriver because that is more compatible with WebDriver. Because in RC, due to JavaScript, IE will not going to support RC, right? And we need to remove all the security parameters as we have discussed in yesterday's session, right? So here, like we have seen that we have 4 checkboxes, and by using, like starting it from 1 till 4, we have checked all the checkboxes. Now let's say this is this section is maintained through some admin panel, right? I can add more checkboxes over here as well. I can remove some of the checkboxes over here as well. Let's say when I have written a code to check the checkboxes from 1 till 4 only, right? And next time, what happens when I run my code, there are more than 4 checkboxes over here. Let's say there are 10 checkboxes over here, right? In that case, I again need to change my code from 1 to 10 in order to handle that, right? Now, what if 2 checkboxes are removed from here and only 2 checkboxes remain? Now, when I run this code, it will gonna check these 2 checkboxes, and then it will gonna throw an error that it is not able to find the rest 2 checkboxes. Right. So we know that where the checkboxes are starting, but this panel is completely dynamic. I don't know how many checkboxes are there in this panel, but I want to write such a code that it should be checking all the checkboxes in this panel. Right. We know where to start, but we don't know till where we need to go. There might be 4 checkboxes in this panel, there might be 10, or there might be 100 checkboxes in this panel. So we need to write such a logic that we need to handle, we need to check all the checkboxes in this panel. Right? Yes, Anand, you can ask your question. Yes, that can be handled as well. That will be handled in the same way. There is no other way to handle it. If the checkboxes are inside a list box, you're going to get XPath for those checkboxes as well. So that will be handled in the same way that I'm showing you over here. Right? So we were discussing that if this panel is completely dynamic, right, if we don't know how many checkboxes are there, but we still know that the first checkbox starts from the first location, right? We know that the first checkbox starts from the first location, and we don't know till where we need to go. So in that case, we won't be using for loop. I'll comment out this for loop. So in order to comment a section, you write it like this. Backslash, star, then backslash, right? So we know that this is starting from 1. So I'll create a variable int I equal to 1, right? And we don't know up till where we need to go. So in that case, I'll create a while loop. While loop and the condition, if the condition is met, then this loop will gonna run. If the condition does not met, then this loop will not gonna run, right? And inside the while loop, I'll say while Selenium dot is element present, and I'll give the same XPath over here, right? So while this XPath is present, so very first time the value will be 1. The value of I will be 1, right? This is the value of I that will be assigned to this I, right? The very first time the value of I will be 1. So when we say Selenium dot is element present, the first value is it present? Yes, it is present. It will return true, and it will go inside the loop, and we'll say Selenium dot check. I'll copy the same thing and paste it over here. We'll say Selenium dot check, and here the value will be 1. It will gonna check the first value, and then what I'll do, I'll increment the value of I by 1. Right. So next time the value of I will become 2. And over here, if the second element is present, yes, it will gonna check the second element and then again increment the value of I. The next time the value of I will be 3, and then 4, and then 5. So now if it becomes 5, if it says that the fifth value is present, no, it is not present. So the condition does not satisfy, and then it will come out of the loop, right? So let's see if we run it. And what I'll do, I'll create one counter as well over here. I'll say int count equal to, I'll start it from 0, and I'll increment this count as well over here. And why I've created this counter? To just count the total number of checkboxes in that panel. So I'll say total check boxes are, and I'll write plus count. Right? Now let's run this. So here we have only given 1. We know that where we are starting from, but we don't know up till where we need to run. So let's run it and see if it's gonna check all the checkboxes in that panel and give us the accurate count or not. Right? Let's going to the website and let's go downwards and see whether it has checked all the checkboxes. Yes, it has actually checked all the checkboxes. Right? It has checked all the 4 checkboxes over here And now if we take a look at Eclipse and see the console, then you can see that the total checkboxes over here are 4. So there are 4 checkboxes, right? So you can see the dynamic code that we have written over here. Now, no matter whatever checkbox will gonna come, it will gonna handle all the checkbox in the same sequence, right? So no matter next time if there are 5 checkboxes or if there are only 2 checkboxes, every time when I run this code, it will gonna check all the checkboxes. So this is how we're gonna use for loop when we know up till what condition we need to run, and we use while loop till the time the condition satisfied. We do not know up till where to run. In that case, we're gonna use the while loop, right? So any questions from this checkbox example? Are you able to get the logic that I'm trying to explain? If Priyanka says that if my test case fail for missing checkbox, it's going to return false. How do I know which checkbox is missing by using absolute XPath? See, the logic that we have implemented over here, this will never gonna fail. No matter how many checkboxes are there, it will gonna check all the checkboxes. And this will only gonna work if all the checkboxes are in a same sequence. If the checkboxes are not in a same sequence, then we need to apply some other logic. And it depends on website to website. Right. So over here, if you have seen the XPath is like starting from 1 for the first checkbox, 2nd for the second checkbox, 3rd from the 3rd checkbox. So if there are 2 checkboxes removed as well, then the XPath will gonna remain from 1 till 4 only. And the logic that we have written, it will gonna check all the checkboxes. This is with the while loop that we have written. If you are using the for loop, then it will only going to print. It will only going to check the checkboxes from 1 till 4. And if in this case, if there are some checkboxes that are missing, let's say if only 2 checkboxes remains on that panel, then this will going to throw an error. And it will tell you that there are only 2 checkboxes. And it will gonna show in the error that these checkboxes are missing. It will gonna fail at that point of time. All right. Anyone else? Any questions? If there are 4 checkboxes at 4 different places, then we'll use relative XPath or we'll use absolute XPath. We're going to use absolute text. We're just going to use absolute XPath only. But then there will be 4 different situations. So we might be using 4 different while loops in that case. Right? It all depends on what HTML structure that is being generated at the runtime. So that we're going to see at the very beginning that what exactly is the structure, the HTML DOM that it is going to follow. Right. So I'm going to show you one more example on this, and after that it will be very clear to you. Right. We're going to handle one more dynamic. Let's say if I go to this website. So this over here that you see, this is world clock, right? This is basically a web table, right? A web table could be anything. It could be a cricket scoreboard as well, right? The cricket scoreboard is completely dynamic, right? As soon as a new player comes in, a row is incremented to that table. As soon as a player hits some score, the score is updated onto that table. right? So that is completely dynamic web table. Same way, if we talk about this one clock, this is also dynamic. The data over here is completely dynamic. After every 1 minute, the hours, the minutes will gonna change, right? These hours and minutes are completely, these days are completely dynamic over here, right? And even I don't know how many rows are there in this table, right? I don't know how many columns are there in this table. By seeing, I can analyze, I can count the columns, but rows, I don't know how many rows are there in this table. Right. There might be a time, I mean, when I open it next time, the row might get increased, or the column might get increased, or it might get decreased as well. Right. So I need to write such a logic. The very first thing that we need to do over here is to find the total number of rows in this table. The very first thing we need to dynamically do is that we need to find the total number of rows, and then we need to find the total number of columns in this table. So once we have total number of rows, total number of columns, then we can extract the entire data from this table. Right? So let's see how we're going to handle this dynamic web table. So this is going to be a really interesting example. So I'll create a new class and give the class name as web table. So we are going to see how we can handle a web table in this example. And this is very important as well. So just copy this code and paste it over here. So Anand was asking me what is this throws in, right? Basically, the person who has created this class, Selenium server, so he has created some exception handling code inside this class, right? Whatever try catch block, whatever exception handling that he has implemented inside this Selenium server class, like whenever there is a failure, it will gonna handle that particular exception, or it will gonna print some message to you that why the Selenium server is failing, right? So that particular thing he has implemented inside this class. Now, when we are creating an object of his class in our class, then we need to add it. We get two options over here. Either I can surround it with the try catch block, or I can just add the throws exception. So whatever that he has implemented in this class, that we need to define it over here. And that this class is also throwing an exception, right? There is an exception that is implemented inside this class. So we need to implement it in our class as well. So whenever there is any error in this class, it will gonna throw that particular exception. Right? This is a part of exception handling. We're gonna cover it in detail. Right?